He saved a beautiful Apache woman from death. The tribe called him the sacred husband. The sun had barely risen over the rugged hills, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. A lone traveler moved carefully through the dry grass, his eyes alert and sharp. He had been walking for hours, following the winding paths between the hills and valleys, guided by instinct and a faint memory of where he might find shelter. His life had always been about movement, never staying in one place for too long. He carried little with him, just a small bag with food and water, a sturdy knife strapped to his belt, and a heart full of curiosity about the world. He was used to solitude, but that morning felt different. The wind carried a strange sense of urgency, as if it whispered warnings to those who were willing to listen. He paused on a ridge and scanned the valley below. The land stretched wide and untamed, a mixture of wild flowers, shrubs, and scattered trees. Somewhere among this vast wilderness, he knew, people lived, though in this remote area they were few and most were cautious of strangers. As he carefully descended the slope, a sudden, sharp cry split the morning air. It was a human voice, strained and terrified. He froze, listening. There it was again, a high-pitched call for help. Without thinking, he ran toward the sound, his boots crunching against the dry earth. The cries grew louder, more desperate, until he reached a narrow clearing surrounded by rocks and thick shrubs. There, caught in a trap made of ropes and heavy wooden stakes, was a young woman. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her body shook as she struggled against the bindings. The trap seemed cruel and unforgiving, designed to hurt and immobilize anyone who stepped into it. The traveler's heart raced. He had seen danger before, but nothing like this. He realized that if he didn't act quickly, she could be seriously injured or worse. He approached slowly, speaking in a calm voice, hoping to reassure her. "It's all right. I'm here to help you. Don't be afraid." The woman's gaze met his, and for a moment fear gave way to a flicker of hope. She tried to speak, but fear choked her words. The traveler crouched beside the trap, examining the ropes and the sharp stakes. He had to be careful. One wrong move could make things worse. His hands moved with precision and strength, untangling the knots and lifting the heavy stakes just enough to free her. The woman flinched when the ropes scraped her skin, but he whispered soothing words, encouraging her to remain still. Slowly, carefully, he worked until the final knot came loose. She fell into his arms, trembling, and he held her steady. "Thank you," she whispered finally, her voice small but filled with gratitude. She had been trapped for hours, maybe longer, and the exhaustion showed in the dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn in places, and her face was streaked with dirt and sweat. Yet, despite everything, there was a quiet strength about her, a dignity that refused to be broken. The traveler helped her to her feet, offering water from his small bottle. She drank gratefully, her hands shaking as she held the bottle. He watched her carefully, ready to act if danger appeared again. The area was remote, and although no one seemed nearby, he knew that trouble could be closer than it appeared. Where am I?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You're in the hills, not far from the Apache village. I don't know exactly how far we need to go, but I can guide you there." Her eyes widened at the mention of the tribe. She had been alone for so long, isolated and vulnerable, that the thought of reaching her people brought both relief and fear. The traveler sensed her hesitation and offered a reassuring smile. "I'll protect you. I won't let anything happen to you." With that promise, they began walking together, moving carefully through the uneven terrain. The woman leaned slightly on him for support, her trust growing with every step. The journey was not easy. The path twisted around boulders, dipped into shallow ravines, and crossed streams with slippery stones. Each obstacle tested their resolve, but the traveler remained patient and encouraging, helping her when she stumbled, pointing out safe places to step, and keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. As they walked, the traveler noticed the scars and marks on her arms and legs, reminders of the hardships she had endured. He didn't ask questions immediately. He wanted her to feel safe first. His presence alone, steady and calm, offered a sense of security that she had not felt in a long time. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The traveler knew they had to find shelter soon. He spotted a small grove of trees near a clear stream and guided her toward it. The shade provided relief from the heat, and the sound of running water was calming. He helped her sit down on a flat rock and offered more water. For a while, they simply rested in silence. The woman seemed to regain some of her strength, her breathing slowing and her body relaxing. She began to trust him, watching him carefully but without fear. There was a quiet bond forming between them, unspoken but deeply felt. Finally, she spoke. Why are you helping me?" The traveler thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do. No one deserves to be hurt or left alone when they need help. You were in danger and I couldn't let that happen." Her eyes glistened with tears, but she nodded slowly. She didn't fully understand him, but she felt the truth in his words. There was honesty in his voice, a strength that came not from force but from kindness. As the day turned into late afternoon, the traveler and the woman resumed their journey. The valley below began to glow with golden light, and the sounds of the wilderness filled the air. Birds calling to one another, leaves rustling in the wind, and the distant roar of a river. They were still far from the Apache village, but hope was no longer just a word. It was a feeling that grew stronger with every step. Along the way, the traveler shared small stories of his own life, moments of adventure, lessons learned, and the people he had met. He spoke simply and honestly, without exaggeration, and the woman listened intently. In return, she told him about the land, the tribe, and the way her people lived. Each story was a bridge between two worlds, forming a connection that went beyond words. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they had reached a small rise overlooking the village. From this distance, they could see the smoke rising from the chimneys and hear faint voices carried by the wind. The woman's face lit up with relief and joy. She was home, finally safe among her people. The traveler smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had come to this land as a stranger, but now he had become part of a story that mattered. He had risked his life to save someone, and in doing so, he had found a connection he had never expected. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken, a step that would lead to trust, courage, and a bond that neither time nor distance could break. As night fell, they stayed at the edge of the village, preparing to enter in the morning. The woman rested, knowing that the stranger who had saved her would be there when she needed him. And the traveler, watching the stars appear one by one in the dark sky, knew that this encounter was only the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. After the night had passed, the first rays of the sun spilled over the village, bathing the simple huts and open spaces in a warm golden light. The traveler and the young Apache woman waited quietly at the edge of the settlement, watching as the daily life of the tribe began. Smoke rose from small fires where women prepared food, while children ran and played, their laughter echoing through the air. The sound of drums from a distant corner of the village signaled a morning ritual, a reminder of the deep traditions that shaped the lives of the people. The traveler felt a mix of awe and nervousness. He was an outsider, a stranger stepping into a world he did not fully understand. Yet, after the night he had spent in the hills, after the danger he had faced and the trust he had earned from the woman, he felt a quiet determination. He would not turn away. He would remain, even if only for a short while, to ensure her safety and learn about the life she had known before the trap had threatened her. The young woman stood tall beside him, though her steps were cautious. Her gaze shifted between the village and the traveler, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty in her eyes. She knew that accepting his help meant trusting someone from beyond her world, a world she had only known through brief encounters with outsiders. Yet there was a sincerity in his manner, a calmness that spoke of courage not born from weapons, but from compassion. As they slowly approached the village, a few elders noticed them and stepped forward. Their faces were serious, brows furrowed in concern, but there was no immediate hostility. The woman introduced the traveler in the simplest terms, explaining how he had saved her life from the dangerous trap in the hills. Her voice carried a mixture of awe and relief. The elders exchanged cautious glances. They had heard of outsiders causing trouble in their lands, taking what did not belong to them or bringing harm under the guise of kindness. Yet there was something different about this man. His actions had saved one of their own, and the sincerity in his eyes could not be denied. After a brief, hushed conversation among themselves, the eldest spoke. "You have saved one of our people," he said, his voice steady. "For that, we are grateful. But you are not yet one of us. You must show respect for our ways, for our traditions, and for the land that sustains us. Only then can you walk among us freely." The traveler bowed slightly, understanding the weight of the responsibility placed upon him. "I will follow your ways and honor your traditions," he promised. "I only wish to help and protect, nothing more." The woman smiled softly, a flicker of relief crossing her features. For the first time since her rescue, she felt truly safe. She knew that her life was no longer solely her own, but that someone beside her would guard it with steadfast loyalty. In the following days, the traveler began to observe the rhythms of the Apache life. He woke with the sun, helping gather firewood and water, learning the subtle ways the tribe communicated and organized themselves. He listened to the elders as they shared stories of their ancestors, the lessons hidden within each tale. He watched the hunters prepare their bows and arrows, noting their skill and precision. Slowly, through careful observation and humble participation, he began to gain a place of acceptance, though it was still tentative. The young woman remained close, guiding him in the small, essential ways of village life. She showed him which herbs were used for healing, which plants were edible, and which areas were sacred and to be approached with caution. She spoke little at first, but gradually words flowed more freely, and laughter began to return to her voice. The traveler learned to respect her knowledge, her instincts, and the quiet authority she held among her people. One afternoon, as the sun reached its highest point, the village was suddenly disturbed by a commotion near the river. A young child had wandered too far, slipping on the slippery bank and falling into the rushing water. Without hesitation, the traveler sprinted toward the danger. He dove into the current, feeling the cold, powerful flow batter against him. Reaching the child, he grabbed them firmly, struggling against the force of the water, and finally managed to pull the child to safety. The tribe erupted with a mixture of relief and admiration. The elders nodded in approval, children stared wide-eyed, and the young woman ran forward, her eyes shining with gratitude. This act of courage, simple yet profound, began to cement the traveler's place within the tribe. It was not enough to have saved one life once. It was the consistency of his bravery and care that mattered. Over time, he learned not only the skills of survival, but also the values that guided the Apache people: honor, respect, and harmony with nature. He accompanied hunting parties not to lead but to assist and learn. He helped repair shelters, carry supplies, and teach the children simple lessons he knew from his travels. Every act, no matter how small, built trust. Every word spoken with honesty strengthened the bond he shared with the tribe. The woman, too, grew stronger in his presence. She no longer trembled with fear or uncertainty, but walked with confidence and pride. She shared stories of the tribe's traditions with him, recounting dances, ceremonies, and the history of her ancestors. In these moments, a connection deepened, a friendship that transcended the initial fear and the dangers of the wilderness. Together, they laughed, learned, and healed, forming a partnership built on trust and respect. Yet, acceptance was not immediate for all. Some of the younger men and women watched with suspicion, questioning why an outsider had earned a place at the edge of their community. The traveler understood their concerns and faced them with humility. He did not boast of his actions or demand recognition. Instead, he continued to serve, to help, and to learn. Slowly, the skeptical hearts began to soften as they witnessed the integrity of his character and the loyalty he showed to the woman and the tribe. Seasons began to change. The harsh sun of summer gave way to gentle autumn winds, and the traveler found himself more comfortable among the people he had only recently met. He could anticipate the needs of the tribe, understand their unspoken rules, and act in ways that strengthened their community. The woman, once vulnerable and frightened, now stood proudly beside him. Together, they moved as partners, not only in survival but in the subtle, meaningful rhythms of daily life. One evening, as the sky turned shades of purple and gold, the tribe gathered around a large fire. The elders spoke of the importance of courage, wisdom, and unity. They told stories of those who had defended their people in times of danger and honored those who acted without selfishness. The traveler listened intently, feeling a deep sense of belonging that he had never known before. For the first time, he understood that true courage was not about strength alone, but about the willingness to protect and to serve with humility. The young woman sat beside him, her hand brushing against his. She did not need to speak the words. The bond between them was clear. He had become her protector, not just through the act of saving her life, but through the steady, unwavering presence he had maintained ever since. And the tribe, once hesitant and wary, now saw him as more than an outsider. They recognized him as someone who had proven his worth, someone who honored their ways and respected their lives. Days turned into weeks, and the traveler continued to grow into his role. He learned the names of every family member, remembered the paths through the hills, and understood the ceremonies that connected the tribe to their land and history. He shared stories from his own journeys, not to boast, but to entertain and teach. The children adored him, the adults respected him, and the elders watched quietly, their judgment gradually turning into acceptance. Through every challenge, every moment of learning, and every small act of kindness, the traveler and the woman became inseparable. Their bond was not rushed or forced. It grew naturally, nurtured by trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. And as the tribe observed this connection, they began to understand something extraordinary, that courage, compassion, and loyalty could cross the boundaries of origin and blood, creating a union that was both rare and sacred. By the time the first frost of winter touched the village, the traveler was no longer simply a guest or a stranger. He had become part of the fabric of the tribe, not by demand or desire, but by the authenticity of his actions and the respect he had shown. The young woman, once in mortal danger, now walked with confidence, knowing she had a protector who honored her people and herself. Together, they had navigated the delicate path between fear and trust, danger and safety, isolation and belonging. The elders, watching quietly from a distance, began to speak among themselves of the man who had arrived from the hills and had chosen to remain. They spoke of his courage, his humility, and the bond he shared with the young woman. And slowly, very quietly, a recognition began to form, a recognition that he was someone worthy of respect, someone whose presence could be honored, not feared. The story of that morning in the hills, the moment he had risked everything to save her, was no longer just an event. It had become the foundation of a deeper, enduring trust. And as the traveler looked around the village, watching the people he had grown to care for, he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey far greater than survival or courage. It was a journey of belonging, connection, and the slow, beautiful unfolding of a life shared in trust and mutual respect. The traveler had now been among the Apache tribe for several weeks. Each day brought new lessons and challenges, and he had grown accustomed to the rhythms of their life. Yet, despite the trust he had earned, some of the tribe's members remained cautious. Not everyone was ready to accept an outsider, no matter how brave or kind he had proven himself to be. The young men, in particular, watched him carefully, questioning why a stranger had gained the woman's trust and a place near the tribe. The traveler understood their hesitation. He had not come to replace anyone or take anything from the tribe. He had only come to protect and help, but words alone were not enough to convince them. Actions were what mattered, and he would need to prove himself in ways that went beyond saving one life or assisting in daily chores. One morning, as the sun rose behind the hills, the elders called him to a meeting. The air was tense, filled with the weight of expectation. The elder who had first welcomed him spoke slowly with deliberate care. "We have observed your actions," he said. "You have helped our people, learned our ways, and honored our traditions. Yet trust is not given lightly. You must face a test, not of strength alone, but of your commitment to our tribe and its values." The traveler nodded respectfully, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. He did not fear the test, for he knew that proving himself was not about pride, but about honor and responsibility. The woman he had saved stood beside him, her eyes filled with quiet encouragement. She had come to rely on his presence, his guidance, and his strength, yet she also understood that he needed to earn the respect of those who had protected her before he arrived. The elders led him to a clearing near the edge of the forest, where a series of obstacles had been arranged. It was not a simple physical test, but a combination of skill, judgment, and understanding of the land. He had to navigate a path through dense trees, cross a river on unstable rocks, and retrieve items placed in hidden locations, all while avoiding potential hazards and demonstrating respect for nature. As he began, the young men watched closely. Some whispered to each other, doubt in their voices, while others merely observed silently. The traveler focused entirely on the task, moving carefully, studying the patterns of the forest, and listening to the subtle sounds around him. He noticed the birds calling, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the shift in the river's current. Every detail mattered, and he used his knowledge from his travels to anticipate dangers and make safe choices. Halfway through the challenge, he came across a steep slope, slick with recent rainfall. A misstep could lead to a serious fall. He paused, evaluating the terrain, and then carefully climbed down, using his hands and feet to maintain balance. At the bottom, he found the first hidden item, a small carved figure placed beneath a bush. He picked it up respectfully, understanding that it represented not just an object, but a lesson in observation and patience. The next part of the test led him to the river. The current was stronger than it appeared from the bank, and the rocks were slippery and uneven. The traveler took a deep breath and stepped in, feeling the cold water swirl around his legs. With careful movements, he crossed the river, ensuring he did not disturb the water's natural flow more than necessary. At the far bank, another item waited, an intricately woven basket containing dried herbs. He retrieved it gently, mindful of the significance it held. Throughout the challenge, the woman followed at a safe distance, watching with admiration. She had always known the traveler's courage, but seeing him approach each obstacle with patience and respect for the land deepened her appreciation for him. She understood that his strength was not merely in action, but in thoughtfulness and awareness. Finally, the last part of the challenge required him to climb a rocky incline and retrieve a small bundle placed atop a narrow ledge. The climb was difficult, demanding both physical strength and careful planning. The traveler found handholds and footholds, moving deliberately to avoid slips or falls. As he reached the top, he paused to catch his breath, looking out over the village and the surrounding hills. In that moment, he understood the responsibility that came with his place among the tribe, not just to protect, but to honor the land, the people, and the traditions that had nurtured them for generations. With the final item in hand, he returned to the elders, who watched quietly, their expressions unreadable. The young men who had doubted him remained silent, but their eyes followed his every move. The traveler approached the center of the clearing and presented the items one by one, explaining his careful handling and the thought behind each action. The eldest elder finally nodded. "You have faced the test with patience, courage, and respect. You have shown that your heart and mind are aligned with the values of our people. It is not only bravery that we honor, but wisdom, care, and humility. You have proven yourself worthy." A murmur of approval spread through the watching crowd. Even those who had been skeptical could not deny the traveler's dedication and respect. Slowly, the young men approached him, offering nods of acknowledgement. One by one, they extended hands in friendship, and the traveler accepted each gesture, understanding that trust had been earned through actions, not words. The woman smiled as she stepped forward. "I knew you could do it," she said softly. Her voice carried pride and warmth, and for a moment, the traveler felt the weight of all that he had endured lift from his shoulders. The bond between them had grown stronger, not only through survival but through shared trials and mutual respect. Days turned into weeks, and the traveler continued to prove himself through consistent effort. He accompanied hunting parties, helping track game with patience and precision. He assisted in building shelters, repairing fences, and preparing food. He shared stories with the children, teaching lessons learned from his travels, while learning from the elders about the history and customs of the Apache people. Each action strengthened his place in the tribe, and slowly, the initial skepticism faded. The elders began to include him in councils, seeking his input on practical matters, while the young men began to see him not as an outsider but as a companion and protector. His relationship with the woman became more visible, though still respectful. They moved together in the village, side by side, supporting one another while honoring the traditions and expectations of the tribe. Yet, the traveler never let pride take hold. He remained humble, understanding that his acceptance was not permanent, but contingent upon continued respect, care, and service. Every day was an opportunity to learn, to assist, and to strengthen the trust that had been so carefully built. The woman's presence was both a reminder of his purpose and a source of quiet joy. She encouraged him when he doubted himself, and he guided her when challenges arose, creating a partnership grounded in trust, loyalty, and shared experience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, the tribe gathered around a large fire. Stories were told, songs were sung, and dances performed to honor the land and their ancestors. The traveler watched, listening closely, feeling a sense of belonging that he had never known. The woman stood beside him, her hand brushing against his, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey and growing bond. The elders spoke of courage, loyalty, and the importance of protecting the community. They recounted tales of heroes who had acted selflessly, not for personal gain but for the good of all. The traveler understood that his path was now entwined with theirs, not as a leader but as a protector, a student, and a friend. He realized that true acceptance came not from one great act, but from consistent care, understanding, and humility. As night fell and the fire crackled, the traveler reflected on the journey so far. From the moment he had rescued the woman in the hills, to navigating the challenges of integration into the tribe, every step had tested his courage, patience, and understanding. And yet every challenge had also strengthened him, deepened his connections, and taught him the meaning of respect and honor. The young woman leaned slightly toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have become part of us," she said, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Not because of fear or obligation, but because of who you are." The traveler smiled, understanding the depth of her words. He had not sought recognition or reward, yet in the eyes of the tribe and the woman, he had found a place he could call home, a place defined not by blood, origin, or past, but by actions, integrity, and care. In the following days, life continued with its routines, lessons, and quiet joys. The traveler and the woman walked together through the village, learning from each other and from those around them. Their bond, once born of rescue and necessity, now flourished in mutual respect and growing affection. And slowly, the tribe began to see not just a man who had saved a life, but a man who had proven himself worthy of their trust, a man whose presence honored their traditions and strengthened their community. The journey was far from over. Challenges still awaited, both from nature and from the complexities of human relationships. But the traveler faced each day with the same courage, patience, and humility that had brought him this far. He understood that acceptance was not a destination, but a continuous process built on respect, care, and integrity. And with the young woman at his side, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that together they could navigate the uncertain path of life with trust, courage, and honor. Weeks had passed since the traveler had proven himself worthy of the tribe's trust. His presence had become familiar, his actions respected, and his relationship with the young woman steady and supportive. Yet, something extraordinary was about to happen, an event that would mark a turning point in his life and in the life of the tribe. The elders had called a council in the largest open space of the village. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Families, hunters, and children assembled quietly, the air filled with anticipation. Whispers traveled through the crowd as people speculated about the unusual meeting. The traveler approached cautiously, sensing the importance of the moment. He stood beside the young woman, who held his hand briefly, a silent reassurance that they would face this together. The eldest of the elders stepped forward, his posture commanding respect. "Today, we recognize a man who has acted with courage, respect, and loyalty," he began. "He has not only saved one of our people, but has also proven through deeds that he honors our traditions and values. Such actions cannot go unrecognized. He has earned a place among us, not as a stranger but as one of our own." A hush fell over the crowd. The traveler felt his heart quicken. He had never sought recognition or reward. His only aim had been to help and protect. Yet standing before the tribe, he realized that the moment carried a weight far greater than any personal pride. The acknowledgement was a symbol of trust, acceptance, and respect, a bond that went beyond words. The eldest continued, his voice steady. "For these reasons, we honor him with the title of Sacred Husband. This title is given only to those who act selflessly, who protect, respect, and care for the people and their women. It is not a title to be taken lightly, and it carries responsibility, courage, and honor." The traveler felt a mixture of awe and humility. He understood the significance of the title, its weight and meaning within the tribe. To be called a sacred husband was not merely to be admired, but to carry the duty of protecting, guiding, and honoring the community. It was a role he had never imagined for himself, yet he accepted it wholeheartedly, knowing that it was both an honor and a responsibility he could not take lightly. The young woman stepped forward, standing beside him. Her eyes reflected pride, trust, and a deep connection that had grown between them over weeks of shared experiences. She had witnessed his courage in the hills, his patience in learning the tribe's ways, and his consistent care for the people. Now, as the tribe formally recognized him, she felt a quiet joy and relief. He had earned not only their trust but a permanent place within their lives. The tribe celebrated in a ceremony rich with tradition. Drums began to beat, creating a rhythm that resonated through the village. Songs were sung to honor courage, loyalty, and the bonds of community. Children danced, elders chanted, and families brought gifts of food and handcrafted items. The traveler watched, humbled by the depth of their culture and the respect they showed for those who acted selflessly. As part of the ceremony, the traveler was given symbols of his new role. A carefully woven sash, decorated with patterns representing protection and loyalty, was placed around his shoulders. A small carved token, representing the unity of the tribe, was handed to him. Each gift carried meaning, a reminder of the duties and expectations that came with the title of sacred husband. He accepted them with reverence, bowing his head to acknowledge the tribe's recognition and trust. The young woman smiled as she placed a hand on his arm. "You have earned this," she said softly, "not through words but through actions. You have shown what it means to be brave, kind, and wise." The traveler looked around at the faces of the tribe, children, hunters, women, and elders alike. He saw trust, respect, and even admiration. Yet he also saw expectation. Being recognized as sacred husband was not an endpoint, it was a beginning. It was a commitment to continue protecting, to continue learning, and to continue honoring the people who had welcomed him into their lives. In the days following the ceremony, his life changed in subtle but profound ways. Tribe members sought his advice on matters large and small, from helping during hunts to guiding young men in the skills needed for survival. The young woman walked beside him, assisting and learning, their partnership now recognized and respected by all. Together, they moved through the village with a sense of purpose, their connection visible yet respectful, a model of trust and care for others. The traveler also took on new responsibilities. He helped plan protective measures around the village, ensuring that traps were safe for the tribe and that boundaries were respected. He assisted in teaching younger members how to navigate the land safely, how to read the signs of weather, and how to act with caution and respect toward nature. Every action reinforced his commitment to the tribe and the sacred role he now held. One afternoon, as he walked with the young woman along the river that ran near the village, they spoke quietly about the significance of the title he had received. "It is more than a name," he said. "It is a responsibility, a promise. I cannot take it lightly." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the sunlight on the water. "And you do not," she replied. "Every day you show that your courage is matched by your heart. That is why the tribe honored you. That is why they called you sacred husband." The traveler felt a deep sense of purpose settle in his chest. He had once been a wanderer, moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere for long. Now he was part of something larger, something enduring. He had earned respect, trust, and honor, not through force or dominance, but through consistent courage, humility, and care. The elders continued to watch him, offering guidance and wisdom. They shared stories of previous sacred husbands, men who had lived lives of service and protection, leaving legacies that inspired generations. The traveler listened carefully, understanding that he was now part of this lineage. It was not a privilege to be taken lightly, but a commitment to live with integrity, courage, and dedication. Over time, the traveler and the young woman became inseparable in the eyes of the tribe. They worked together, learning from each other, supporting each other, and guiding those around them. Their bond, formed through rescue, trust, and mutual respect, now stood as an example of harmony and partnership. The tribe began to see that the sacred husband was not only a protector, but also a companion, someone whose heart was aligned with the values of the community. The traveler's presence also inspired others in the village. Young men began to act with more responsibility, following his example of humility and care. Children learned from his stories and actions, understanding that true bravery involved thoughtfulness as well as strength. The young women observed the partnership between him and the woman, learning that respect and trust formed the foundation of any relationship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the tribe gathered again around the fire. The traveler and the young woman sat together, listening to the elders recount tales of courage, loyalty, and honor. The traveler felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for the community he had become part of, and for the bond he shared with the woman he had saved. He understood that being sacred husband was not about recognition. It was about living each day with integrity, courage, and care for others. The young woman leaned close, her voice soft. "You are more than the title," she said. "You are a part of our lives, our people, and our story. That is why the tribe honored you." The traveler smiled, understanding the depth of her words. Titles could be given, but true respect and honor were earned through actions, consistency, and the way one treated others. He had learned that lesson long ago in the hills when he first rescued her, and every day since he had lived it. As the fire crackled and the stars appeared overhead, the traveler looked around at the faces of the tribe. He saw trust, hope, and admiration. He saw the future they were building together, a life rooted in respect, courage, and shared responsibility. And he knew, deep in his heart, that the title of sacred husband was more than a recognition of the past. It was a promise to the future, a commitment to live with honor and care for those who had welcomed him as one of their own. The ceremony, the recognition, and the trust of the tribe had transformed him. He was no longer a wanderer. He was a protector, a partner, and a valued member of a community that had once been a stranger to him. The young woman's hand rested gently on his arm, a reminder that their journey together was just beginning. Together, they faced the future with courage, compassion, and the knowledge that true honor was earned through deeds, respect, and unwavering loyalty. And so, under the vast sky filled with stars, the traveler embraced his new role, understanding that the title of sacred husband was not the end of his journey, but a new chapter, a chapter filled with responsibility, trust, and the promise of a life lived with integrity and love. With the title of sacred husband now bestowed upon him, the traveler's life had changed in ways he had never imagined. He was no longer a wandering soul, moving from place to place, seeking only survival. Instead, he had become part of something larger, a community bound by trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Each day, he awoke with purpose, knowing that his actions mattered not just for himself, but for the people who had welcomed him into their lives. The young woman he had saved remained by his side, her presence a source of strength, comfort, and companionship. Together, they walked through the village, assisting wherever they could, learning from the elders, and helping the younger members understand the importance of courage, respect, and service. Their partnership had become a quiet example to all, showing that trust and loyalty could create bonds deeper than blood alone. Life in the village was not always easy. Challenges arose from nature and circumstance alike. Harsh weather would strike without warning, requiring quick thinking and hard work to protect homes, animals, and food stores. Occasionally, neighboring tribes would come near, and negotiations rather than conflict were necessary to maintain peace. Through each challenge, the traveler remained steady and calm, using his wisdom, experience, and growing understanding of Apache life to navigate the difficulties. The young woman often accompanied him during these tasks, providing guidance from her own knowledge of the land and her people. She taught him the ways of the tribe in small but meaningful ways, how to read the signs of the seasons, how to understand the movement of animals, and how to honor the spirits of the land. In turn, he shared lessons from his travels, teaching skills such as observation, strategy, and problem-solving. Together, they created a balance, each learning from the other while reinforcing the trust that had formed between them. Over time, their bond grew into something deeper. While the woman had once relied on him purely for protection, she now admired his wisdom, humility, and dedication to the community. He had shown her that true strength was not measured by force or dominance, but by the ability to act with care, consistency, and respect. Their conversations became longer, filled with laughter and thoughtful reflections. Quiet moments of companionship, like sitting by the river or walking through the hills, became treasured experiences that neither would forget. The tribe continued to observe him with a mixture of admiration and respect. Children would run to him with questions, eager to learn from someone who had proven both courageous and kind. Young men approached him for advice, understanding that his strength was coupled with wisdom. And the elders, once cautious, now treated him as a valued member of their community, seeking his input on matters ranging from hunting strategies to village safety. One day, while the traveler and the woman were walking along the edge of the forest, a messenger from a nearby tribe arrived. There had been reports of a dangerous animal disturbing nearby settlements, and the neighboring people sought guidance and help. The traveler did not hesitate. He carefully examined the situation, observing the terrain, understanding the habits of the animal, and preparing a safe plan for the villagers. With the woman and several tribe members at his side, he guided a team to neutralize the threat without causing harm to the animal or the land. The successful resolution further solidified his role as a protector and advisor. Stories of his deeds began to spread beyond the tribe, inspiring admiration and respect among neighboring communities. People spoke not only of his courage, but of his humility, wisdom, and dedication to the well-being of others. Through these actions, the traveler's presence became more than a local matter. It became a symbol of honor, loyalty, and selflessness. Despite the growing recognition, the traveler remained humble. He never sought praise or rewards, understanding that his actions were meaningful only when done with sincerity and care. Each day, he focused on the needs of the tribe, whether it was assisting in the fields, teaching the children, or helping repair shelters damaged by storms. His dedication became a living example of the values he had embraced: courage, loyalty, respect, and service to others. The young woman, now fully healed and confident, continued to support him in every way possible. She had grown into a wise and capable member of her tribe, guiding others with knowledge, patience, and compassion. Her partnership with the traveler had become a source of inspiration, showing that true strength and leadership could be shared, that trust and cooperation could create bonds that enriched the lives of everyone around them. As the years passed, the traveler's role expanded further. He helped train new hunters, sharing his knowledge of tracking and observation. He assisted in the teaching of traditions, ensuring that the younger generations understood the values and customs of the tribe. He even began to participate in ceremonies, not as an outsider, but as a respected member whose presence honored the tribe's traditions. The young woman often reflected on their journey, thinking back to the day he had saved her from the trap in the hills. That single act of courage had set in motion a chain of events that changed both their lives forever. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the hope that had flickered in her heart when she first saw him. And now, years later, she saw how trust, respect, and courage had blossomed into something enduring, a partnership that strengthened the community and created a lasting legacy. The traveler, too, often reflected on his journey. He thought about the time he had spent wandering alone, the dangers he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Yet, he understood that nothing in his past compared to the life he now lived. Here, among people who trusted and respected him, with the woman by his side, he had found purpose, belonging, and a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He realized that true courage was not only about facing danger, but about earning trust, showing humility, and dedicating oneself to the well-being of others. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and orange, the tribe gathered for a celebration. It was a festival to honor courage, loyalty, and the bonds that held the community together. Fires burned brightly, drums beat a steady rhythm, and songs filled the air. The traveler and the young woman stood together in the center of the gathering, watching as the tribe celebrated life, unity, and shared values. The elders spoke of the importance of courage that is tempered with wisdom, of loyalty that is proven through consistent action, and of love that is expressed through respect and care. They recounted the story of how the traveler had arrived in the hills, risking his own life to save one of their people. They spoke of the trials he had faced, the respect he had earned, and the title of sacred husband that he had carried with humility and honor. Children listened with wide eyes, inspired by the story of a man who had proven that bravery and kindness could change lives. Young men and women reflected on the lessons of respect, trust, and cooperation. And the elders smiled, knowing that the community had been strengthened, not only by the traveler's actions, but by the bond he shared with the woman, and the way he had integrated himself into the life of the tribe. As the celebration continued, the traveler and the young woman walked to the edge of the village, overlooking the hills where their journey had begun. The memory of that first day, the fear, the danger, and the trust that had been formed, was still vivid in their minds. Yet now, standing together, they felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. They had faced challenges, earned trust, and built a life of purpose, care, and connection. The traveler spoke softly, his voice carrying over the gentle sounds of the evening. "We have come a long way," he said. "From that first day in the hills to now, everything has led us here. I never imagined a life like this, but I am grateful for every step." The young woman smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "And it is only the beginning," she replied. "We have built trust, strength, and understanding. The future will have challenges, but we face them together, and we will continue to honor the tribe and each other." In the following years, their lives became a blend of tradition, service, and quiet joy. They raised children, taught them the values of courage, respect, and loyalty, and shared stories of the past to ensure that the lessons of bravery and compassion would live on. Their partnership became a model for the tribe, showing that trust, care, and cooperation could create bonds that strengthened not only individuals but the entire community. The traveler's story spread far beyond the village. Neighboring tribes spoke of the man who had been a stranger, yet had earned the title of sacred husband through courage, humility, and unwavering dedication. He became a symbol of what could be achieved when actions are guided by integrity, care, and respect for others. And though the traveler had once walked alone through the hills, he now stood surrounded by family, community, and a sense of belonging he had never known. The woman he had saved had become his partner in life, sharing not only love but also responsibility, trust, and vision for the future. Together, they faced each day with courage, guided by the lessons of the past, the wisdom of the elders, and the deep bond they had formed. In the quiet moments, when the stars shone above the village and the world felt still, the traveler reflected on everything that had brought him here. He remembered the fear of that first day, the danger in the hills, and the trust that had grown slowly but surely. He realized that heroism was not in grand gestures alone, but in consistent care, humility, and dedication to others. The young woman leaned on his shoulder, and he held her hand gently. Together, they looked at the village they had helped nurture, at the people they had learned to protect, and at the life they had built. Their story had begun with an act of courage, but it had grown into something far greater, a legacy of trust, respect, and love that would endure for generations. And so, the traveler, once a lone wanderer, became more than a hero. He became a sacred husband, a protector, a partner, and a legend in the hearts of the people who had welcomed him. His courage, humility, and dedication had created a life that was meaningful, respected, and remembered. Through the bonds he had forged, the trust he had earned, and the love he had nurtured, he had found a home not just in the village, but in the hearts of all who had witnessed his journey.